Find a way, find a way.
Hey, it's Christoph Wrights of the Poet Life Podcast, and I am excited for season 4, episode 2. Man, it's exciting to be back in this seat here. Actually, I'm standing up, not in the seat, but it doesn't matter. I'm here with Miss Keziah. How you doing, Keziah?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Keziah, man, how long ago did we meet? This was,
Oh man, had to be like
this
maybe
was
5-6 years ago. Like
I think
five,
it was
six
even
years.
longer than that because remember, I um, I called on True Voices, and you all came to my church to
Mm-hmm.
perform as a group.
Wow.
Were you one of them?
Yeah. So that was
Yes.
probably 7.
Yeah, it was like 7 years, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and that was so awesome, man. I was really grateful for you all to come out and perform like you all did, and like you all brought it. Like my church was talking about that for a long time,
Wow.
you know. Yeah, like really. I think Orville was there too, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was really good. So it's been like 7 years. It's been like
That's
seven
crazy.
years, and I think I came to some of you all's events, and it was just a good time, you know. But I'm excited to have you here on the podcast because, you know, I asked you before we started, and the question was, I think I asked all our guests this just to kind of determine where our direction is going, and the question was, if you could teach a class to poets about your journey, you know, what would that class be about specifically? What was your answer for that?
I said it. The class would be about owning your voice.
Owning your voice. Why?
Mhm.
Why is that?
So I think as people kind of come into spoken word, come into slam, whichever kind of way you come in, whether you start about, hopping open mics or different events or putting out your own work or whatever it is, I think that just about everybody has like a favorite poet, right?
Mm.
Or one that they follow, one that they really like and admire. They love how, they like their wordplay, or they just may like their demeanor, just like something about them and follow them like on socials and stuff. Um, and if you're just beginning, or if you are a bit insecure about how you present yourself as a
Mm.
poet or how you present yourself as a writer, then you may be inclined to take points from your favorite spoken word artist, your favorite writer, your favorite poet. Um, and I think some poets get caught up in that. I think they get caught up in like taking point. Like, this is clearly the way to do it. Look at how the audience responded to their work. Look at how the audience responded to their presentation. But the thing about kind of, pulling from somebody else's voice, their voice is already taken, right? They already have their own voice. So your story and your voice, nobody else can have, nobody else can own because it's yours. So it's a matter of, you know, owning your voice, finding your voice, and sticking with that, and letting that carve out the space it's supposed to carve out for people to hear what you have to say.
Mm. That's major. Did you have to learn that?
I feel like I was a bit of a unicorn in that sense.
Mm.
I didn't really at that time. I'm originally from Memphis, and I've
Okay.
been in Maryland for uh, 9 years, and so the scene wasn't big in Memphis as far as spoken word and poetry. I was always either at someone's open mic or someone's youth service. It was
Mm.
never an in between. It was either open mic or youth service. Um, and that, that is what it is. But there wasn't anybody for me to really look up to. I had some, friends who were poets, but not a whole lot of them. Not a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot of like poet friends and like poet, I guess, constituents. in Memphis, but when I moved to Maryland, where there's a bustling, poetry and spoken word scene, I'm introduced to it, and I'm like, oh wow, this is wow, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and so when I got here, I started looking at people like you mentioned Orville earlier. I started looking at Orville. I started looking at Rebecca Dupas. I started looking at these poets who are, just wonderful at what they do, and how they're able to capture the audience. Now that did not adjust how I reached out to the audience. It didn't adjust how I presented myself to whoever, but I was able to look at them and see how they move. I've seen Orville perform plenty of times. I've seen Rebecca DePass perform plenty of times, and other poets as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to see them in their element. And the only thing I took from that was that I need to be in my element. And I have plenty of friends who now say, um, every time they see me go on stage, every time they see me at the mic, it's like it's a totally different person.
Mm.
It's like I get into like a mode almost. Um, and it's like a totally different person up on stage. And now that I worked on, but I didn't like pull like production value. I didn't pull presentation tips or whatever from, the poets that I admire, the poets that I look to. But if anything, it gave me confidence. That's the thing I pulled from them,
Yeah.
was confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. You give me um a good movie narrator voice when you perform. like yeah, like really. And because I'm engaged, and you're right, because your voice, when we say voice, is more than just the sound of her voice, but
Right.
how she speaks and her cadence and everything. And yeah, I can't sync your voice with anyone else's. Yeah, like really, like.
I
And I
appreciate that.
haven't heard you perform in a while,
Yeah.
so that just tells you I remember. So for sure, for sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So how do you think, like, poets just starting?
Mm-hmm.
How can they start? Is it okay to kind of emulate those who are veterans and then kind of find their way? What do you think?
I think it's important for people who are kind of new to the craft. I think it's important for them to surround themselves with poets for sure. Like
Hmm.
get into the community, be a part of the community. Don't perform at every open mic you go to.
Ooh.
Like sit in the audience, listen to the who hits the stage, like pay attention to all that stuff. Like take it in. Like open mic is a culture, right? And you don't just learn the culture by hopping on stage. Like sit out in the audience, be an audience member just like everybody else that's not performing, and take that in. Watch everything, interactions with the audience. Watch how they do what they do, how they engage. Watch it and see if that's what you want. I've coached quite a few people who started out with like, yeah, I definitely want to get on stage. I want to get on the mic. I'm ready. Like I'm ready
Hmm.
to give it to them. Or let me go. And then they go to an open mic and they're like, oh no, I'm not ready for that. I'm
Mm.
not I'm not ready for that. And that's cool.
Hmm.
That's fine. But you won't know that until you go and experience it, not just as a performer, but just as, a regular person. Just go sit in the audience, experience the scene, the atmosphere, and kind of take that all in a few times before you try to kind of just insert yourself into the community. It's kind of like if somebody wants to, it's like somebody going into a neighborhood and saying, we're going to do this for your neighborhood without ever asking, what do you need? Do you
Mm.
want us to help? Can we help you? It's like we're gonna do this for your neighborhood. You're welcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you came to Maryland, how was the transition?
Um it
Uh,
was it was it was a little sharp, a
yeah.
little aggressive. Because I came from Memphis to Baltimore, right? So
Ooh.
somebody said I moved from the first 48 to the wire, which is funny. What a joke. But I think the first 6 months I was in Maryland, in Baltimore, I think my car got broken into.
Welcome.
Somebody stole my wallet. It was a lot. It was a
Woo.
lot of stuff, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
this is quite a welcome here. But like the transition, I was still around people. Like I was safe. I was still around people. I had community already. And I had a few friends who were up here already, so that helped a lot.
Mhm.
And so I just got more acclimated. I didn't come in as an expert on poetry or anything for that matter. I wasn't even an expert on adulthood at that point. But I came in open, right? I came in willing to learn. And that was, man, the one thing that I can say, but one thing I can say about Baltimore, I can say plenty of things, but one thing I can say about Baltimore is that it's not difficult to find community.
Mm.
Um, it's not difficult to find community in, whatever it is you're interested in. If you're interested in painting, dance, acting, whatever it is, you can find a community of people to kind of be around and learn from. And so that's what I did. I just happened to meet this person, happened to meet that person, was introduced to this person, and it just started, the community and network just started to build from there. So on one end the transition was aggressive, but on the other end, it was what I needed. Like it was, I needed to relocate here. It was where I needed to be, and I feel like I've done a lot of growing.
Sure.
Um, a lot of growing. And it was what I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was what I needed.
When you came, well, what brought you to Maryland? I should ask.
So I came here for it was kind of like a fellowship program.
Okay.
They were looking for young adults who wanted to serve in the city, in Baltimore City. And so I applied, went through the interview process, and my initial job was working. I worked at this church in Baltimore City in a neighborhood called Remington, which is barely recognizable right now. Another story, gentrification, another story. But at this church that served as like a community hub. So they had like a food pantry, and they had a soup kitchen, and they had homework help for the kids. They had winterization projects for the neighborhood, just and different programs for people in the neighborhood. So I was kind of like the community social worker. And so that was life changing. That's the easiest way I can say it. It was life changing. And so that's what brought. And I feel like my time in Memphis, being born and raised there, I feel like I had gotten what I needed to get from my hometown. I'll forever love Memphis, but I feel like I had gotten what I needed to get, and it was time to move along.
Sure. Did the poetry scene or the poetry community, was that what helped you get comfortable in your transition?
In a way, yeah. In a way. I was introduced to True Voices in like 2 or 3 months after I got to Maryland.
Nice.
I was introduced to them. But outside of True Voices, I was introduced to the poetry scene, I don't know, maybe like a year into being in Maryland. And it's like I said, the network slowly started to build, and that made it easier and easier for me to find opportunities to perform or do whatever else. So yeah, in a way, yeah, the poetry community definitely helped to stabilize me in this area. Yeah.
Gotcha. You said you've grown, right? You've experienced some growth. and in that growth is business intertwined in that growth, and how has your business acumen related to poetry grown?
So, no shade to my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
No shade. In Maryland, it was a lot easier to get paid gigs.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot easier, and not have to justify my worth to an event plan. It felt good for that to happen.
Sure.
And because poetry is a bigger thing here, because spoken word is there's a bigger scene here, more well-established scene. The opportunities it was so many different types. Like I wasn't confined to youth service open mic, right?
Right.
I've done I've done poetry from everywhere, from a Easter service at a church to a barn. I kid you not. I kid you not. I've performed in front of 5-year-olds and 95-year-olds. Conferences, schools, churches, universities, you name it. And I'm still struck by it sometimes, that I've been able to just be in front of all these people and then connect with them in such a way. There's some interactions I've had with people that are going to stay with me for the rest of my life. And that added, that much more meaning. But as far as business, yeah, it definitely, I guess you could say, boomed when I got to Maryland, for sure.
For sure. So in as it relates to business and poetry, did you know that you could actually have a career in poetry? When did you know, if you knew?
It's funny you should ask that. So someone that I've known my whole life told me that when I was still in Memphis, told me that poetry was just a hobby and I need to focus on something more tangible.
Mm-hmm. Sounds familiar.
I didn't expect that to have the impact that it did, but it did, especially if you hear from somebody that you trust, somebody who you believe has your best interest at heart, for them to minimize your gift to a hobby. So much so that it took me a long time to even say that it was a gift, just because I'm like, well, I mean, just a thing I do.
Right.
I couldn't even, I lost the belief in it myself. And that's not true. That's not true. Poetry has taken me all over the country and has provided food for me and gas and paid bills. Yeah. So even now, sometimes I still kind of struggle with it. And I have to remind myself that, they were speaking from a place of like ignorance.
Right.
They're just not ignorance. And well, I mean, I guess there's no positive to ignorance, but they didn't know any better. So I have to chalk it up to that, but that don't mean it didn't hurt.
Right.
Doesn't mean it didn't impact me. So, yes, you can have a career in poetry for sure.
Sure.
For sure.
Sure. Yeah, we're on a mission We're on a mission to show and prove, even to prove it to ourselves, because we've been, like you said, we've been told for so long there's no money in poetry, which makes no sense at
No sense.
all. For there to be a lane for a comedian that can stand there in one place and evoke emotion for an hour or more.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's all this is, it is a person who has the gift and the capability to evoke emotion,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's laughter or nirvana of just music.
Right.
uh, um, what do people think poetry does?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly. That's
yeah,
right.
there's different levels to it, of course. Obviously, there's different skill sets, but there's no way in the world you can tell me that a comedian can 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 evoke more emotion than a poet or vice versa.
Right.
Not
And
taking,
poetry,
yeah,
that's what poetry is. Poetry is emotion.
yeah,
Like that's what it is.
period,
Yeah.
period. So now, do we have work to do in believing in it and believing in ourselves and in our capabilities? Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. To know that I can do a set of 30 minutes. I can do a set 1 hour and it be diverse in content and not just one lane as far as whatever the topic is,
Mhm.
right? I have a Swiss Army knife of poetry, and that's going to take work. It just
Right.
is, right? And so, so I think it starts with belief, right?
Right.
And then it's the execution. All right, it's time to get my portfolio up. It's time to
Mm-hmm.
get my endurance up.
Mm-hmm.
My study game, like you said, that was so good. Don't just go to an open mic and get up there and perform. Study the room,
Right.
study the poets there. That that is that's hard for people to hear,
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it is.
you know?
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, yeah. And understandably, but it's necessary.
Absolutely.
It's necessary because you can be great, go to a different city and not know the room
Mm-hmm.
and get up there and say something crazy.
Crazy. You gotta
you
read the
know?
whether you're featuring or what, you gotta read the room. You gotta read the room. Yeah,
Mm.
that's whew.
I-
Listen,
yeah.
I saw a guy and he knew me. I don't know how he knew me, but he knew me and I think he liked my work. And so he was like, yo, tonight I'm doing, okay, I might step on some toes. He said, tonight I'm doing such and such as poem. I'm like,
Mm?
pardon me? He was like, yeah, I'm doing such and such as poem. I love it so much. It really inspired me. I inboxed him on Instagram and I was like, yo, bro, can I do your poem? And I never heard back from him. I'm like, that's a no. If if you didn't,
Right.
if you, but but he did. He got on stage, didn't read the room for one. The poem is very difficult to execute properly. Like the person whose poem it is the person who does it best. It's a very difficult poem to execute, and he tanked. He tanked. I mean, the people didn't say nothing to him. Like as far as clapping and snaps, no. After he did that, it tanked, and I'm like, I could have told you that.
Right.
Like you didn't even read. Like see what poems you have in your chamber, that you
Right.
can give people. Don't somebody else's work and had memorized it to a T. I'm like, yo, you could have spent that energy
Right.
memorizing your own work.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Living, you learn. Sometimes you learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. But you are releasing an album, or have released, or releasing.
No, releasing is coming out September 30th.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Which album is this? Number what?
This is album number 4.
Ooh, vet in the
Number
game.
4. Yeah, this is album
4.
number 4. Yep.
Okay. Take me back. Take me back to your first album, and why an album? Your first one.
Whew. You talk about somebody that did not know what the heck they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
That was me on that first album. Did not know what I was doing. I searched everything. I can't even say I Google searched them. Just dating myself a little bit. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
Google search. I Yahoo searched. Uh, everything I thought I needed to know, like the whole process. I went to random studios in Memphis to record. I also recorded with a friend of mine, and he helped me out with like production and all that stuff. It was I mean, I
Growth.
think it came out well, but I think that it was just me not knowing what to do. But I knew I had something to say. I knew I had something to get out, something to release.
Mm.
And so that was my first album. It's called Matters of the Heart. And yeah, whew, it was very much it was super churchy. I have to say that. It was super churchy. Um that was just, I feel like that was kind of my mindset at that time. Like, whole um get right church and let's go home type of vibe. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was Lord, it was super churchy.
Structure wise, was
Mhm.
it poetry on top of music, or?
Yeah, it was well so, so I was also very poor. So I couldn't afford production for everything. I had some music for some things. But I couldn't afford production for everything. So some
Mm-hmm.
of them just the poem. Some of them is over music.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. So what does that look like as it relates to growth? Um, Obviously, I guess the budget gets larger, right?
Mhm.
But I'm always curious, why poets create albums.
Mhm.
Um, what's the rationale between a poetry album?
So for me, just because of the way I write, I think that it makes sense for me.
Mm,
Uh, I typically write according to, well, no, I won't say that. I'll say I typically write, I don't write all the time. I don't write every day. There's some
hmm
people that do, and more power to them. I'm not one of those poets. Um, but when I do write, it's such a it's such an emotional like pull for me, um, that I have to take a like literally have to like kind of take a break from writing, and then come back and write because I write from an authentic place. I write
hmm
from my own experiences. I write from experiences that I've been close to, things that I've witnessed and seen and kind of mulled over in my head and mulled over among community or whatever. And so for me, collect like the album that's coming out on the 30th, those poems have been written for 2 years.
mm,
Just never a few of them I've never performed. I think a couple of them I did at an open mic just to kind of test it out and see what the response would be. But for the most part, um, yeah, I hadn't performed any of the other ones. And yeah, those poems have been written for 2 years. But and making it an out, because at first I was like, I'm gonna just come out with a single. I'm just come
Mhm.
out with an individual poem, and I'm gonna release that, and I'm gonna promote that, and that's gonna be that. And then a couple months later, I'm gonna come out with another one. I'm gonna release that, promote that, and then I'm gonna come out like I thought I was gonna do it like that. And I'm like, that's kind of a lot of work. That's kind of a lot of work. Like, w- get back to the main thing is basically what I told myself. Get back to the main thing. Um, and it's getting these words out and helping people um, the best way I can and the way I know how. And so it made sense to compile, and this happened each time. Just made sense to compile them into one body of work versus releasing them like individually.
I see.
So that's why I did it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, if we can get to the ABC 1, 2, 3 of creating an album,
Mhm.
especially a poetry album,
Mhm.
and again, the premise of this podcast is to help other poets realize that it's possible, but also to share how. Um, I've never produced an album, and it's very intriguing to me. You know, what's the first step, and where do you go? Who do you reach out to? Like when you say, you know what, I'm gonna produce and well, not produce. I don't know. I'm going to make an album.
Yeah.
What do you do first?
Um. So the first stop is probably the hardest stop,
Hmm.
and that is if you've got a collection of poems, figuring out which ones are going to make it onto the album. Like you want your best work to be displayed and like, on, and streaming and all that stuff. So picking out the best ones, the ones that you feel like will have the most impact. And it is not throwing the other poems away, but just that process of like, I mean, record labels do the same thing.
Hmm.
An artist can go in and record 25 songs in the studio and they will trash 10 of them, 15 of them. Like, nope, 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 nope. Go through the whole process and pick which would be the better ones, pick which one would be the single. And so it's that process. Um, and from there, you figure out your recording situation. Are you going to go to a recording studio? You're going to go to your homeboy's basement? You're going to record it yourself? Like, how you going to do that? And that just varies based on what you're able to do. And from there, um, while you're doing that, because I absolutely believe in working in tandem. While you're, in the recording process, you can also, if you know producers, like if you want to put it over music, and music producers, reach out to producer friends, see what their rates are, give them an idea. If you have an idea of what you want the music to sound like or what you want it to be similar to, send them some reference tracks, to let them know kind of what you want to do, what you want it to sound like, and go through that process. You have to pay them, yes,
Hmm.
unless it's your cousin who's just trying to get on and can make a few beats, then that's different. You gotta plug, you gotta hook up. But
Right.
other than that, yes, get producers, and yes, you have to pay them. Um, Also, this is around the time where you're coming up with the concept of your album. You've figured out which poems you're going to include. What message do you want all of these poems together to convey? And that will help you come up with your title. That will help you, if you're using a graphic designer or if you're doing it yourself, come up with what you want your album cover to look like. Um, and so there's that. So let's say you're at the end of it. You've recorded all your poems. You found your production. What do you do next? You get an engineer who is going to mix the poems and the music and make sure the levels are right and make sure everything sounds good. So send your files over to your engineer to take care of that. And from the engineer, you need to, and I think sometimes if poets do record music, like poems over music, they tend to skip steps because it's cheaper. I mean,
Steps like what?
so mastering.
Mm.
So mastering makes your work essentially radio ready, right? And so it's all the professionals do it. It is highly recommended to get your stuff mastered. But usually, if something sounds good in the mix, people are like, "Well, where do I get it mastered? It sounds good now, No, get it mastered. You never know where it can end up playing." And so, but it also costs money. Like everything costs money. Engineer costs money. Getting it mastered costs money. It costs money. It does. Um, and so there's that. Meanwhile, while that is going on, getting it mixed and mastered and all that, um, come up with a promotional calendar. By this time, you should have, your album cover done. You should have your credits written out and all that stuff, and have your lyrics written out, all that stuff. Um, so promotional calendar, determining what you want your release date to be. So from there, let's say your promotional calendar is done. You know what your album cover is. You got you know how you want the poems ordered on the album. You got that part done. You know what you're gonna do for promotions. Now comes the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you go to a website like TuneCore or DistroKid, or some people still use CD Baby. I used to use CD Baby. I use DistroKid this time. And these are distribution sites that get your album on iTunes and Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Google Play. That's not a thing anymore. They don't have Google Play no more. But all the music streaming services. Um, and so you pay their fee. They walk you through the steps of submitting your music to them. You can pick your release date, and they'll make sure that it's at those stores, those platforms on the release date.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you should sign up with a performing rights organization. There is BMI, there's ASCAP, there's CSAC. I'm on BMI because I think I signed up to BMI because BMI was free. Uh, but a performing rights organization, so that if your music is played somewhere, you get
They'll
credit
catch
for
it.
the spins. Like it's man, listen, get credit for the spins. It used to be where you had to sign up with SoundScan, because people, this is back once again dating myself, when people had CDs and they would
Mm-hmm.
have the barcode on the back of the CDs to sell in stores and stuff. Um, but that's neither here nor there. So there's that, and then as far as promotional stuff, social media is king, right? It is
Right.
it is king, and so you got to figure out what platforms you're going to use to promote your album.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you know people in radio who play spoken word, connect with those people and do what they ask. Um, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube. It's a lot of different platforms that you can kind of choose from how you're going to promote it. If you don't have a YouTube channel, then don't use YouTube. Just about everybody's got Instagram. A lot of people have Twitter. A lot of people have Facebook. Utilize those to the best of your ability to promote your work. Talk to a social media manager, or somebody
Mm-hmm.
who can help you with promotions, like a marketing person, especially if you don't know what the heck you're doing. Talk to a marketing person. Talk to people. I didn't say that enough. Connect with people and talk to people about next steps. Like, get advice. Figure out, all advice ain't good advice, but you can learn from everybody. Like, talk to somebody. Also, lesson I learned: don't do it all yourself.
Mm.
I have a bad habit of being an island, um, and I'm getting a lot better, but I'm not quite there yet. So
I
if
understand.
you, if you have people who have done it before and are willing to share their knowledge, if you have people who, um, people who have different facets of knowledge or different steps that you have to take, absolutely do it. Also, I forgot a very, 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 very important thing. Listen, loc.gov. register your work with the Library of Congress.
Mm.
Make sure that it is yours. They walk you through the whole process. It's like $55 for a body of work. As soon as you have the tracks from whoever mastered your album, go directly to loc.org or I'm saying LOC, sorry, copyright.gov. I'm getting the websites wrong. I'm sleepy. Sorry.
Mm.
Copyright.gov. Go there. They walk you through the whole process. You have to create a profile. They walk you through the whole process. Make sure that it is yours. So if somebody decide 5 years down the line, listen, I need to sample this.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to pay the originator of this track, and that's just going to be what it is. And you find out about it, get your money. Okay.
Right.
So make sure it's yours. Absolutely make sure it's yours.
Is that the same thing as copyright? Well, yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. Copyright.
So you got copyright and then you got trademark. So trademark is for like marks, like service marks and symbols. Copyright is for like documents, like books,
Gotcha.
Different things like that.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So your marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was different from your last albums to now? Or did you do the same?
I think with the last album, I had a little bit of an advantage, partially because I was part of True Voices and we were
Mm-hmm.
performing all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also think because I had a live recording and I had it at Anacostia Art Center in Southeast and in their black box theater, and it was sold out. It was jam packed in there to the point that people who hadn't purchased a ticket were trying to get in. I guess they were trying to see what all the commotion was about, see
Right.
where all these people were going. I don't know. It was sold out. And so I think that helped push the promo and the marketing for my last album for sure. So this album is a bit different. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not planning any events, any in-person events, because I did want to do like an album release party. But then the Delta variant hit and was like,
Right.
so definitely, that was no more. So yeah, this time around it's just being intentional with social media.
Good.
And being intentional about letting people know and how I let people know. So yeah.
Mm. So what gave you the idea to do your testimonial videos?
So honestly, it was a little bit selfish. It might have been a little bit selfish. I really wanted to know what people thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to some friends of mine and I'm like, listen, I want you to listen to this poem I wrote. And I want you to record yourself listening to it and tell me what you think, good or bad. And all of them came back good. And I'm like, thank you. I'm letting you know what I'm gonna do with this. This is gonna be posted on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, so it was, I really wanted to know what people thought. Like even when the album drops on the 30th, I want to know what people think. I want to hear people's feedback on it because I know what I invested emotionally, financially, mentally. I know what I invested, but I want to hear if it impacted other people. Like that I'm not just talking out of the side of my head, that I'm not just, talking to a brick wall. I want to know if it resonates with people. And so far the response I've gotten is that it absolutely does. But yeah, I wanted to know how people felt about it.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. You have it. You have the file.
The file.
Would you be interested in featuring one of your pieces on the podcast?
Sure.
You got the file on you. We can we actually can share screen type feature.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have it on your end as well.
Yeah,
Where it says share. Yeah. Let's take a listen.
All
Since
right.
while we're here. Why
Wow,
not?
yeah.
I think I've heard one or two of them based off of the videos that you put out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's see here.
Which one should I do? So I'm gonna let you choose. All right.
All right.
Okay. So we got 1:15 a.m.
That's the title.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
We got kept,
Okay.
narrative.
Huh.
Uh
Coincidentally,
uh-huh.
narrative.
You want to do narrative?
Remember I said that you have, for me, like a narrator's voice in the movie. Let's do narrative.
That's the narrative. Okay.
So exclusive on the Poet Life podcast, Keziah's new album. What's the name of the album?
Girls and Elephants.
Girls and Elephants. And this track is number 13 called Narrative.
No, this is track is number 4.
Number 4?
Yeah.
Number 4 on the album Girls and Elephants, Narrative by Keziah. Let's check it out. Loving the production already.
What an interesting narrative. Our prayer shifted from thank you for blessings, Lord, to thank you for sparing us. Skittles and sweet tea mixed blood with rainbows. Didn't change the color of the victim. Fox News should change the color of his character. Low key, high key, maybe God was preparing us. Because the skin B badge, BID, speaks for us before we ever show ID. And it just might be that these black babies who grew up to be black kings and queens got some traumatized blood coursing through their veins and need to toss IVs. So sick of seeing RIP. But all lives matter, huh? Since you heard Black Lives Matter, we lost count on how many cc's of black blood has splattered from bodies that look like mine. Bodies with music too loud, bodies that's jogging around, bodies that rolled up in mats, bodies driving home from practice, bodies gathered to study the word, bodies that just got off work, bodies that's just getting home, bodies playing games with her son, bodies just leaving the party, bodies that's holding a gun, probably, that kid he probably just had a gun. 8 years after Trayvon, the same conversation goes on as these black parents hug these black bodies tighter and tighter. This feels less like life and more like plight, and the graduating class of murderers gets wider and wider. Portrait to panoramic. Families are in a panic. Used to be just get a degree. Now it's make it past 23, or better yet 25. And don't run any errands at night. And if you get pulled over, just comply. If you get pulled over, go on Facebook Live. Wear glasses to make sure you look nice. You'll lower your threat level if you smile. Use your corporate voice when you reply. Take the fear out of your eyes. Don't have your music volume too high, please. Just be wise. Whatever it takes, just make it home to your family tonight. You can't be surprised that we're tired or misunderstand why we need a little time. It feels like we never stop grieving. Hearts skip beats when one of us stops breathing. Justice ain't never been found in anybody administratively leaving.
Ah, man. Come on, man. Come, come, come on, man. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. Um, that's a whole lesson. That's a whole lesson for man. That's a class in and of itself. How to create a poetry album, because for too long poets would just put their poem on top of what sounds like a random track.
Mm-hmm.
And the poetry could be great, but because they just wanted an album, they just slapped two things together.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so good, because what you put with, not behind, what you put with as a compliment, as an enhancement to your poetry, is atmospheric. That's what that right there is what I'm talking about. That's what that is supposed to be. That's what that's supposed to be. And I'm God, man, that's so good.
Thank you.
That's so good. The rain, the kids in the background. Uh, it was so purposeful, and the meaning behind the words. And that's just one song. How many tracks?
It's 8.
That's like a movie. Like that's a your album from that one track is a Broadway play. No, seriously. I wish people would understand how many ways poetry can go. Even you, like
Mm-hmm.
this album, you can do so much with,
Right.
especially the way you did it. God, that's an unplugged situation. That's oh man, bro. That's good. That's good. I can sit on that for a while. That's good. I hope folks are taking notes. And that's why I asked you, what's the breakdown? How is it done? And I want to connect with you. I want to connect with you for Poet Life University.
Okay.
Let me turn my mic around because I put the mic close to the speaker. I want to connect with you on Poet Life University and bring you on as a professor to teach how to produce or how to create. I don't want to say produce, because did you produce it? You had a producer.
No, I didn't do. I didn't
Right. That's why
the music part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just say create. How to create a poetry album correctly. I'm so serious about that, man, because so many poets cheapen their poetry when they just, put their poetry behind some track.
Right.
But when you add what you added to yours, it only heightens the potency of it.
Mm. Wow.
Literally makes it a audio movie, because you can
Wow.
see the kids in the playground. It's raining out there. Like, man, that's so good. That's so good. That's so good. Yeah, that's good. Why the title? Tell me about the title.
So, interesting thing about elephants. This album is it's for everybody, but I think the focus is women. And the herds are led by the matriarch.
Really?
Mm-hmm. The herds are led by the matriarch, so she leads the way.
The cartoons don't tell you that.
No, they don't. Nah, they don't tell you that.
Right.
Elephants are super hyper intelligent. They are also emotionally intelligent. So just the way that they connect with their young and the way they're able to lead in such a capacity. And leading, especially leading a herd or a flock of people, that comes with great responsibility. And but like you said, they don't teach you that on cartoons. Nobody would ever know that unless they like did the research or whatever.
Mhm.
So the same thing with women in general. This world wouldn't be without women, and not just from a birthing standpoint, but just in leadership and how she does everything, how she has to fight for what she has and fight for what she does. And we talked about earlier, fighting to prove her worth um, in a world like this. And so that's who I wanted to talk to. And I talk about some different. There's a few subject matters that I hit on. One in particular. Uh,
Huh?
One in particular, I talk about um, molestation in the church.
Mm.
I'm very careful with the words. I had to use a lot of restraint because I knew all the dirty details. I had to use a lot of restraint, but nobody talks about that.
Mm.
So I had to put it in a poem. Like it had to happen.
Man, I really hope um I hope you do so much more with what you have um than just an album with these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Like I see workshops, based off the topic and the subject matter,
Mm-hmm.
add alone that topic that you just spoke of.
Mm-hmm.
I see a book called Girls and Elephants. I
Mm.
see a children's book called Girls and Elephants.
It's funny you should say children's book. Actually, just finished my children's book. It's not
Oh,
about girls and elephants, but yeah, it's coming out next year.
really?
Mm-hmm.
I challenge poets to diversify their pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Their poems are so much more than poems. I say this all the time. Poets are so much more than their poems.
Mm-hmm.
And their poems are so much more than their poems. Because they can be presented in so many different ways,
Right.
whether it's an episode, like I said, a play, a book. I want poets to wring those poems out
Mm-hmm.
and get every bit of whatever out of it, and because it's so rich, the poems are so rich that you can do more than just perform it
Mm-hmm.
and write it, so I'm excited about this project. I really am. It's 10:30 at night and I'm hyped. I'm hyped. That piece got me hyped. I can't wait to listen to the whole thing. So I'm ready. Where do I go to? What is it? Pre-order? What's
Yeah,
that look
you
like?
can pre-order right now. It's on iTunes, Apple Music, Amazon Music. They have pre-order available now, but the album itself will be available officially September 30th on all streaming platforms.
That's so good. So we're going to connect, you and I, because I'm sure there's a lot of poets that want to create a poetry album, but
Mm-hmm.
don't know how. And at Poet Life University, we hire the best poet professors around the world to teach poets or aspiring poets to be able to do what they did. Step 1, step 2, step 3. 8-week class once a week for like 2 hours. They get to ask questions, be shown resources. It's on Zoom, right? So you can share a screen, get on the whiteboard, all of it. And by the time the poet leaves that class, they'll know what they need to do and probably have already started the project. So that's what we're doing. We are on a mission to continue to uplift the poetry community, but to start building the poetry industry. And I want you on board because that don't make no sense. That don't make no sense. I'm telling you. And I don't big up folks all the time, you know. But that's what because that's why I asked you the way I asked you. You know, why do poets feel the need to create a poetry album? Because I'm used to the poem on top of a track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. Listen, everybody, if you don't know Keziah, you know her now. Just where can they find you and where can they find your work?
So they can find my work on my first 3 albums are on all the streaming platforms. So it's on Apple Music and I think it's some on Tidal. I know Tidal came along later in life, but I think it's some, if not all of them, are on Tidal.
They search your name? How do they search?
They can search Keziah the Poet. So just my first name, Kezia the Poet, and all of the albums are under that name.
Got you. Sweet. I'm gonna do that. So this new album has 8 tracks, and they're on the level like that, on the level of narrative. Man, did it take a while to determine what the sound effects would be and where you found them?
It's more than just like when you're talking to producers,
right?
It's more than just like saying, I need a track to this. Some poems you might not have any idea what you want the music to sound like.
Right.
Some you like, listen, I want like a storyteller sound. I want like a kind of something kind of solemn, something a thinking track. That's the type of thing I want. And they may ask you for some reference tracks, something that you have heard before. And you send them a couple links to YouTube's or something and let them kind of hear and get a vibe, and then they can build and work from there. You can say, like I said to my engineer, I'm like, we were back and forth with like levels of like my voice and the music. And I'm like, I want the music a little up here and I want my voice a little up here. And kind of just working that way, like really listening to it and just really, really connecting with it and how you want it to show up when the final project is done.
Yeah, I could tell that. You know, I can't articulate it because I'm not musically inclined, but I could appreciate it. You know, I almost forgot there was music there because it was like a pot of gumbo. You know, it just worked well together. You know, I didn't hear your voice and then the music, and it was just all one piece.
That is the goal, always.
Man, that's good. I'm gonna end this before I keep talking about it. Because I thank you. I'm really happy that I asked you and you obliged, you know, my audience to allow us to hear one of your tracks. And I'm sure whoever's listening or watching, they're in the same amount of awe that I am and can't wait to listen to the entire album. So September 30th, right?
September 30th.
September 30th. This episode drops on September 16th, so people will have 2 weeks to pre-order and everything. Listen, it's Keziah the poet. Do you have any shows coming up?
I don't have any shows coming up. I mean, I could hop into some open mics, but I've been being super careful with COVID and everything.
Yeah.
I've actually turned down a few. So just trying to be careful.
I completely understand. Well, come on board the Poet Life University. Let's get virtual, and not play around with the variant. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. Listen, it's the Poet Life Podcast. Thank you all for listening, for watching. I know you all enjoyed this episode with Keziah. I know I did, and she brought me back. I've known her for like 7 years, and it's so good to, be in the presence virtually. Soon, I'm sure to be in person. And so if you all enjoyed this episode, like, share, comment. Let's get this conversation going. Let's talk about how to create an awesome poetry album, but also how to know your own voice. And I'm sure that you got some insight from Keziah. If you could leave the audience with something to inspire, motivate them, what would that be?
Write it. Like, go ahead and write it. Even if no one ever sees it, there's power in you putting your words on paper, and there's even more power in you reading it back to yourself. Write it. Forget it's not quite where I want it to be. It's not. Write it. Period. Perfect practice makes perfect. That's so good.
That's so good. Just write it, man. You know what? It's so funny that you say that. I posted today on Instagram and said, my post was, I said, poet, what are you waiting for and who are you waiting on? Just start. The puzzle pieces will appear as you move forward, no matter how fast or slow you go.
Just write it. Get started.
Just get started, man. And who knows, months, year from now, you might be right where Keziah is sitting talking to me about your journey in the poetry industry. Just start. Listen, thank you so much for checking us out. It's the Poet Life Podcast. We're out. Awesome.
Introducing the Poet Life Podcast. Go check it out today on your favorite platforms, including iTunes, Apple Music, and the website, thepoetlife.com.
Find a way, find a way.